Nothing takes me back like closing my eyes and letting the 1960s play out in my mind, as if it were only yesterday. I was young then, barely stepping into adulthood, and the world felt wide open, full of sounds, colors, and possibilities that had never existed before. The 60s were not just years on a calendar. They were a way of living, a rhythm that shaped us all. I still remember the mornings in our neighborhood when the paperboy would toss the newspaper onto porches with a thud that could wake the dog. The milkman left glass bottles at our doorstep, each with cream floating right at the top, and if you shook it just right, it felt like pure heaven in a glass. The smell of fresh-cut grass drifted through open windows, mixed with the faint hum of a neighbor's lawn mower sputtering back to life after a winter's rest. Life moved slower, but it also pulsed with a kind of excitement that buzzed in the air. If I had to pick one thing that defined the 60s for me, it would be the music. Radios were everywhere. Big wooden consoles in the living room, tinny transistor radios clutched in sweaty teenage hands, car radios blasting through open windows on warm nights. Music didn't just play in the background, it defined who you were. I remember lying on my bed, tuning the dial carefully, just to catch a station playing the Beatles' latest single. When I Want to Hold Your Hand came on for the first time, it felt like someone had switched the world from black and white to color. The Beach Boys gave us California dreams, even if we'd never seen the ocean. And Aretha Franklin taught us about respect before we even knew we needed it. Everyone seemed to have a record player, and the ritual of lowering the needle, hearing that gentle hiss before the song began, that was magic. Albums weren't disposable. They were treasures. We'd pass them around, borrow them from friends, and argue about lyrics until the sun came up. Television became our hearth. Families gathered around the set as if it were a fireplace. Ours sat in a wooden cabinet, the kind that weighed as much as a small piano. At first, it was black and white, fuzzy at times, with rabbit ear antennas that needed constant adjusting. But when color TV arrived, it was like the future had walked right into our house. Saturday nights meant Ed Sullivan. I'll never forget the night he introduced the Beatles. My mother gasped at the long hair, my father muttered about noise, and I just sat there, heart pounding, knowing I was watching history. In real time, we tuned in for shows like Bonanza, The Andy Griffith Show, and I Dream of Jeannie, and every commercial felt like a promise of what the future could hold. Cars with more chrome, kitchens with more gadgets, families smiling over gelatin molds that looked too pretty to eat. Cars were everything. They weren't just machines. They were freedom, wrapped in chrome and horsepower. I remember the rumble of a Mustang when it first appeared on the street, sleek and powerful, like nothing we had seen before. Teenagers spent every Friday night cruising Main Street, engines humming, radios blasting. Gas was cheap, 35 cents a gallon if you can believe it, and we measured freedom in how far we could drive before curfew. My friends and I used to pile into the back of a Chevy Impala, windows rolled down, hair whipping in the wind. We weren't going anywhere important. It was the drive itself that mattered. School in the 60s had its own rhythm. Desks in neat rows, chalkboards filling with long cursive letters that teachers wrote with grace. We learned state capitals, memorized poetry, and recited the Pledge of Allegiance each morning while facing the flag at the front of the room. The smell of mimeograph sheets still lingers in my memory, those purple letters slightly smudged, the paper warm and damp, the scent sweet and chemical. Everyone wanted to be the one to hand them out just for the chance to breathe in that strange perfume of learning. Lunch was nothing fancy. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, sometimes fish sticks, but it filled us. And if you brought lunch from home, it was in a metal lunchbox decorated with superheroes, cowboys, or cartoon characters. You'd open it to find a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper, maybe an apple, maybe a cookie, if you were lucky. The way we dressed told the story of the decade. In the early years, the boys still slicked back their hair with pomade, wearing white T-shirts and jeans rolled at the cuffs. The girls wore skirts that swished at the knee and saddle shoes that clicked on the pavement. But as the years rolled on, everything loosened up. Skirts crept higher, colors got bolder, and patterns went wild. Tie-dye, bell-bottoms, fringe jackets, they all found their way into our closets. Boys grew their hair longer, letting it fall across their foreheads, inspired by British bands. Girls wore eyeliner thick and heavy, their hair teased high or sometimes ironed flat for that sleek new look. Every outfit felt like rebellion, and freedom rolled into one. The kitchen was the heart of the house, and every evening it drew us together. Mothers orchestrated meals like conductors, timing the roast just as the biscuits browned and the Jell-O set in the fridge. Tupperware was everywhere. Pastel bowls with matching lids that burped when sealed. Proof that freshness could be kept with just a little plastic magic. TV dinners were still a novelty, a treat more than a staple. We'd peel back the foil on divided trays, each holding a small universe. Salisbury steak, peas, a square of mashed potatoes with gravy, and a brownie that never cooked quite right. On nights like that, we sat in the living room, balancing the trays on our laps, watching the evening news. Coca-Cola came in glass bottles, ice cold and heavy in the hand. You'd pop the cap with a church key, the hiss of carbonation like music. That first sip was sweet, sharp, and unforgettable. By the mid-60s, many of us were balancing school with part-time jobs. I worked at a corner drugstore, stocking shelves and ringing up customers on a cash register that clanged with every sale. Others flipped burgers at diners, pumped gas at full-service stations, or delivered newspapers at dawn. The money wasn't much, but it gave us independence. Saturdays often meant chores before play, mowing lawns with push mowers that roared to life after a few stubborn pulls, or hanging laundry on backyard clotheslines, the sheets snapping like sails in the wind. Work was expected, but there was pride in it too. The 60s weren't only about fun and music, they were about change. I remember watching Martin Luther King Jr. deliver his "I Have a Dream" speech on a grainy TV, feeling chills run down my arms. The civil rights movement was not something far away. It was in our towns, our schools, our conversations. And then there was Vietnam. Boys I knew, kids I'd sat next to in class, were suddenly gone, drafted, shipped overseas. We wrote them letters, we prayed for them, and sometimes we got the news no one wanted to hear. The war hung heavy over everything, even when we tried to dance it away. But there were triumphs, too. I will never forget the summer of 1969, standing in my living room as Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. We all held our breath, eyes wide, hearts swelling with pride. For a moment, it felt like humanity had no limits. But there were triumphs, too. I will never forget the summer of 1969. standing in my living room as Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. We all held our breath, eyes wide, hearts swelling with pride. For a moment, it felt like humanity had no limits. Radios and newspapers carried the news for days. At school, our teachers made us write essays about what it meant. In the evenings, neighbors stood outside looking up at the moon, whispering that men were really up there. It felt impossible, and yet it was true. The 60s were not only about inventions and triumphs, they were about voices. Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, their words filled living rooms, car radios, and our hearts. And when each was taken from us, the silence felt unbearable. Civil rights marches filled our screens and sometimes our streets. People carried signs, locked arms, and sang songs that echoed with courage. Some of us joined, some only watched, but all of us felt history moving under our feet. But for all the heaviness, we were still young. We still went to dances in school gyms decorated with balloons and streamers. We still sneaked sodas in diners after curfew, laughing louder than we should have. We still fell in love, even when the world outside felt uncertain. Drive-in theaters were magic. The smell of popcorn, the sound of speakers hanging from car windows, couples sitting close in the back seat. The movies were almost background. The real magic was being together under the stars in a world that felt like it belonged only to us. Summers meant freedom. Bikes with banana seats carried us for miles. Ice cream trucks jingled down the block. Sprinklers cooled us in the heat, and scraped knees were just part of the fun. Childhood didn't need supervision. It only needed a sunset to tell us when to come home. Comic books stacked by our beds told stories of superheroes and astronauts. Baseball cards traded at recess felt like treasure. A single quarter could stretch across a whole Saturday from candy to pinball to a comic book that would be read until the cover curled. At home, Sundays meant ironing clothes, polishing shoes, and family dinners where you squeezed as many people around the table as it could hold. The house smelled of roast and pie, and laughter always spilled over the edges. Vacations weren't flights overseas. They were long drives in station wagons, siblings elbow to elbow, maps unfolded in the front seat, parents arguing over the best route. Motels with neon signs promised swimming pools, and diners with pie displays made the road itself the adventure. We didn't text or email. We wrote letters, ink on paper, sealed in envelopes with stamps licked and pressed, and when a reply came weeks later, it meant more than any instant message ever could. Photos weren't endless. You posed carefully, saved film, and waited days for prints. Family slideshows were an event, the projector clicking, the screen glowing, and everyone groaning when another vacation picture appeared upside down. Even the everyday moments mattered. Neighbors whistled as they walked by. Mailmen knew your name and patted your dog. Everyone's shoes lined up by the door told a story of who was home. It was ordinary, and that made it perfect. The 60s were contradictions. They were peace and protest, joy and sorrow, innocence and rebellion. They were nights of music and mornings of news that shook us to the core. And somehow, through it all, we kept living, kept laughing, kept believing. Looking back now, it feels like a dream, one filled with vinyl records, chrome cars, handwritten letters, and the glow of a TV in a living room. It was imperfect, but it was ours, and it shaped who we became. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear it. The crackle of a needle on vinyl, the laughter of friends cruising down Main Street, the rustle of newspapers in the evening. The 60s aren't gone. They live inside us, playing like a song that never ends. Handwritten thank you notes were a must. You received a gift, you sat down, wrote in neat handwriting, and mailed it. Parents checked every word. It wasn't just manners, it was respect, and somehow it made gratitude feel more real. Cartoons only came on Saturday mornings, and it felt like a holiday every week. We'd wake up early, pour a bowl of cereal, and sit cross-legged in front of the screen. Bugs Bunny, Popeye, Tom, and Jerry. If you missed it, you waited until the next week. Paper chains counted down the days to Christmas. Bright red and green loops hung across classrooms and windows, each one torn away with excitement until the big day finally arrived. Halloween wasn't candy from stores. It was homemade popcorn balls, candied apples, and cookies wrapped in wax paper. No one worried. Neighbors made them with care, and we ate them with joy. Winter meant foggy car windows. We wiped circles clear with our sleeves, peeking through at the road ahead. No defrosters, just determination and cold fingers pressed against the glass. Easter mornings were pastel dresses, polished shoes, and baskets filled with jelly beans and chocolate bunnies wrapped in foil. After church, egg hunts turned lawns into treasure maps. Summer nights glowed with fireflies. We chased them with jars, punched holes in the lids, and fell asleep watching them blink beside our beds. By morning, they were gone, but the magic stayed. Trips downtown meant polished shoes, department stores with window displays, and the sound of cash registers ringing. The clang of ka-ching was the sound of commerce, honest and final. 4th of July was parades and fireworks, marching bands, flags waving, kids waving sparklers as the sky exploded in color. It felt like the whole country was celebrating together. Neighbors gathered on porches, iced tea in hand, sharing stories while cicadas hummed in the background. Nothing urgent, just the rhythm of community. School assemblies began with the anthem. Oh, no music tracks, no big production, just kids, teachers, and a flag at the front. Some sang loudly, others mumbled, but everyone stood. Family slideshows were theater. The projector clicked, the room darkened, and everyone laughed at upside-down photos of the Grand Canyon or Uncle Joe asleep in a chair. Halloween costumes weren't from stores. They were bed sheets turned into ghosts, cardboard masks, and creativity stitched together by moms at the kitchen table. Saturday mornings were chores before play, lawns cut, floors swept, beds made. Only then did bikes roll down the street, the whole neighborhood alive with shouts and laughter. Road trips were games, license plate bingo, counting cows, the alphabet game. With no screens, boredom bred imagination, and the miles passed with laughter. Winter afternoons meant snow angels, red cheeks, and cocoa by the radiator. Coats, scarves, mittens, all soaked but full of joy. Magazines weren't skimmed, they were devoured. Pages folded, clipped, saved, and reread until the staples rusted and the covers curled. Station wagons, chrome bumpers, and gas stations with attendants in pressed uniforms. Cars weren't just transport. They were part of the culture, part of who we were. Christmas Eve meant matching pajamas, family photos with blinding flashbulbs, and the quiet magic of lying in bed smelling fresh laundry and hope. When we look back, we don't just see the big moments. We see the little ones. A folded paper chain, a peanut butter sandwich, a record spinning in a dim bedroom. The 60s were made of details that stitched life together. They were years of both innocence and upheaval. But through it all, we laughed, we danced, we grew up, and we held on to each other. Now, decades later, when I close my eyes, I can still hear it. The crackle of vinyl, the hum of streetlights, the laughter of friends on summer nights. The 60s aren't gone. They live in us forever. The Pyrex bowls in pastel shades were everywhere in the 60s. They never seemed to break, no matter how often they were dropped in the sink. Mothers passed them down, and by the time we grew older, those same bowls were still in the kitchen, holding salads, dough, or Sunday desserts. They were quiet witnesses to our lives. I remember the streetlights flicking on at dusk. That was the signal, the unspoken curfew. Kids ran home from games, their laughter echoing against the houses. Nobody called or tracked us. We just knew it was time to go when the lights glowed. In school, teachers wrote cursive on chalkboard so perfectly it looked like art. We'd watch the loops and tails of the letters flow, trying to copy them on our lined paper. If you messed up, it wasn't just a mistake, it was a lesson. A raised eyebrow from the teacher said everything. The soda fountain diner was where life happened after school. Red vinyl booths, chrome trim, milkshakes shared with friends, and a jukebox that never seemed to run out of songs. It felt like a stage where you could be young, loud, and alive. I can still hear the clacking of my old typewriter keys. Sitting at my desk, pounding away, a stack of paper growing beside me. No delete button, no spell check. Just you, the ribbon, and the rhythm of writing. At Christmas, some families had aluminum trees that spun slowly under color wheels. Red, green, and blue lights shimmered across shiny tinsel. To us kids, it was pure magic, as if the living room had turned into a winter wonderland from the future. The corner store was the heart of the neighborhood. $1 in your hand meant bread, candy, or maybe a soda. The shopkeeper knew your name, and you felt 10 feet tall walking out with your little brown paper bag. Snow days were a gift from heaven. We'd wake to the transistor radio announcing school was closed, then rush outside with sleds. The cold air bit our cheeks, and the hill became a racetrack of laughter and tumbling bodies. The 60s were full of daydreams about the future. We imagined flying cars and robots, sketching them in our notebooks, convinced they'd arrive any day. Even as we biked down ordinary suburban streets, our minds soared miles ahead. Now, as an old man sitting on the porch at sunset, I sometimes see those memories float back. The laughter of friends, the glow of a TV set, the shine of a classic car, all drifting around me like fireflies I once tried to catch.